guys, it is time to talk about everything we read, or how little we read in November. Hey guys, if you are new here, welcome to The Book Path. I'm Nicole. If this isn't your first rodeo, thanks for sticking around. It is time to talk about everything, or a very few things we read in November. I think it's official that I am in a little bit of a reading slump. Not so much that it's like I wasn't reading, I was still reading. It just was like reading wasn't my primary thing that I kind of wanted to do. There was a lot going on. Holidays, family, you know, birthdays, things like that. So yeah, but anyway, so long story short, I ended up only reading 4 books for the month of November. I think that is the smallest amount I have read all year. But let's go ahead and talk about the books that I actually did read for this month. So first up, I was able to receive an arc of Carved in Crimson by Annabelle McCormick. This was really interesting. It was a little different than what I had previously kind of seen, which I really liked. Basically, you have this world where people are born and some of them have magical powers or elemental powers and gifts, and some of them get sealed and so that they can't use their gifts, and others are allowed to have their gifts. Usually those are obviously the royal borns. And there are obviously different groups of people that have kind of started to rebel, and there's kind of this ongoing war, so to speak, going on. And in this war we have 2 sides, right? And on this side is you have who we know as Riker. Riker is not his real name. He is actually the 4th prince, I want to say, in the royal line. But he's kind of been the playboy, the carefree, causing lots of mischief and trouble, usually with good intentions. But his father, the king, doesn't want to hear of it anymore. So he kind of punishes his son by sealing his powers and telling him that for like so many years he's going to have to live as just a regular soldier, get by without his powers, and kind of learn things to kind of straighten him out. So he goes now by the name of Riker, and he's kind of living in secret. On the flip side, you have Saren. Saren is part of this group of kind of nomadic rebels. They all have their powers. They've never been bound by their powers. Her family at one point lived in kind of the for lack of a better term, the capital city where the king reigned over, but through to some things that happened in their past, they had to escape there, and they have joined this kind of, like I said, nomadic, rebellious group, and have been living there. She is training as one of these soldiers, and she's fairly decent at what she does. She has like ice magic, but she's very hard on herself. And one night while she is at her post, her younger sister, who is kind of being groomed to become a soldier alongside of her, is visiting, and stuff goes awry, and the younger sister ends up being taken, and Saren is blaming herself. Her father and her older brother have gone to try to find the younger sister, and so they're gone. It's been months. Nobody knows what's going on with them. And Saren's just feeling the blame. She comes across a beast in the forest, which isn't really normal. They usually steer the ground, and it's one of these kind of magical beasts gone wrong. And it's about to attack her when Riker appears and kind of saves the day, but in doing so is left at death's doorstep. And in order to save his life, Saren brings him back to her village. Now her village is very anti-outsider. They want to kill him, and so once again, to save his life, she bonds herself in a sort of magical marriage to him. And so the story goes on where you have them in this kind of relationship wanting to break this marriage bond because it was only done to save his life. They're hitting kind of odds, kind of in a little bit of enemies to lovers, because he is on one side of the system, she is on the rebel side. not knowing, you know, you have the hidden identity because she doesn't know that he's actually a prince. And there are other intrigues and games afoot. As always, there is some competition type aspects of this. There are survival game type aspects to it, as well as some mystery in who's really who and what's going on. So I ended up giving it 4 stars. It was good. It was one of those ones where there's a lot of stuff happening. Like there's a lot of plot happening, but the way in which you're reading it, it feels kind of slow, if that makes sense. So I was kind of feeling that, but it did start to pick up about 60% of the way through. It did start to pick up to where I was, you know, plop my butt on the sofa and not moving and trying to get through it because I wanted to know what happened at that point. That being said, I do like Riker, and I like some of Saren's friends and the comments they make about Riker, because they make all these wonderful, delicious comments about, you know, if you have to be with an outsider, you know, you didn't go so bad. So it had its really good moments and fun, and I do like Saren because she does try to fight for herself and for the things that she's believing in, but she's also trying to fight for the truth as well. So she's not exactly one-sided. You know, she's not completely hateful. She has an understanding, especially because her parents have a background from those places. So it was really good. It's already out. Go check it out if you like magic kind of fantasy romances with competition aspects, survival, fun friends, things like that. Definitely check it out. Next up, we went back to one of my up-and-coming favorite authors. I have read the entire series, and so when the arc came out for her final book in this series, I jumped at it, and that is Will She Break by Alyssa Ray Bowman. I have loved this series. The first book had a touch of suspense in it. The second book had kind of a love triangle, and in this book, well, we'll just get into it. So I'm not going to try to give too much away because I don't want to give the spoilers for book 1 and 2, as this is book 3. But in this, we are finally getting Emma and Blake's story. You've kind of been watching them flirt a little bit through the first 2 books, and now everything is coming to fold. And so in this, you're getting a little bit more backstory on Emma and how Emma, she has, for lack of better term, she is the victim of a narcissistic mother. Her mother very much manipulates the situation, pitches her against her brother and her sister and how successful they are. Emma's kind of treated as the outcast. Her mother kind of overlooks her, manipulates a lot of situation, and places a lot of guilt and blame on Emma for doing things that are either out of Emma's control or, you know, Emma's just trying to be nice and she's constantly trying to appease her mother. So there is that kind of emotional and traumatic kind of bond there. And in addition to this, Emma had been dating basically one of these kind of wealthier kids in the area. Emma is not necessarily poor, but she's not necessarily wealthy, right? And she's been dating this wealthy kid, and it seemed like everything was going great, and then all of a sudden the switch flipped on and he became a lot more controlling, a lot more manipulative as well, gaslighting her, and becoming, you know, abusive, both emotionally, and then it got physical. And once it got physical, she was smart enough to get out of it. So go for her. But she does have these kind of emotional scars from these people in her life. And she's just a really good and sweet, caring person. She loves to be there for her friends, loves to support them. She's also one of the ones that will pay attention to the details of situations and kind of give the people what they need without knowing that they really needed it. You know, she's just a very good person. And she works as one of the waitresses in the restaurant, and then she helps out with the ski lodge that her friends own. She helps out there as well. So it's not like she's rich or anything like that. She is just a regular, average, everyday girl just trying to survive. On the other side, we have Blake. Blake is one of the friends in the little group that's been going on for the books. And he also is a waiter, and he helps out at the lodge as well. And you basically find out that his mother had been battling with cancer when he was younger, and his father just couldn't handle the stressors of that, and so the father abandoned him and his mother. And so he, from a very young age, has been helping out while his mother is battling cancer. She went into remission, and at the beginning of this book, you're finding out the cancer is back. And so he is trying to navigate that because obviously he doesn't want to lose his mother. It's that kind of potential grief that could happen, while also trying to hide it from his friends because he doesn't want any pitying looks from them. And through this, Blake kind of finds his peace and his calm through Emma. And Emma's very scared to love again because of what had happened to her before. She always fears that she's never going to be good enough for somebody, and she doesn't want to be used, and Blake has a little bit of a reputation of being a playboy. So interestingly enough, this book kind of goes over what happens in the first two books at a glance. You're kind of getting Emma and Blake's story as if it was happening from the first book on, because there are incidences from the first two books that take place in here, but you're getting Emma and Blake's point of view. So at some point it felt like, okay, well, there's not really a new story here. You're just getting a new POV to what's going on and a little bit more detail into what's going on with Emma and Blake. However, what I loved is that Emma and Blake are just normal people, right? There's no fey magical abilities. Blake's not a secret millionaire that's going to whisk her away. It's not anything like that. These are just two people that have, you know, regular jobs. They're not even in an office really type setting. It's just regular people, and I don't want to say regular situations, but situations that I think a lot more people can relate to, with having family members that might not be the most supportive and might make you grow up in somewhat toxic environments, as well as being in relationships that even if they didn't get physically abusive, they could have been mentally abusive. And I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to, as well as having a parent who gets ill with cancer, because that is something that is very prevalent and a lot of families have to go through it. And there are kids that have to go through it, and there are older, you know, young adults and new adults that have to go through that, where they become the caretaker for their parent, and what that kind of looks like and the stressors with that. And then you have these people that come from those backgrounds trying to form their own relationship and moments of happiness and chance at happiness. And so I thought that was really, really good and very well done. There are some moments that are very sweet. There are some times where I felt like Emma was making Blake work maybe a little too hard for things. But obviously this is a happily ever after ending, as with all her books. And so I was just really happy to see it. And I'm kind of sad that the series is over. However, I have it on good authority from the author that there are going to be some other books coming our way, which do feature some of these characters in them. So same world, but new series. So I am excited and looking forward to reading some of those. So next up is the only physical book I actually read for the month, and it was our book for the Magical Readathon Year in Aurelium, where for the month of November we had to read a nonfiction. So I decided to go with one of the biographies on my shelf that I've been wanting to get to, and that was Michael J. Fox's Lucky Man. Now, I grew up with Michael J. Fox's movies, and I grew up with his TV show Family Ties, so I was familiar with who he was as an actor, and it wasn't until later on in life that I had heard that he was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And I just kind of was like, wow. And then to find out that he had actually gotten diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's, which happened in his late 20s, I wanted to know his story, because obviously he was still acting at this time, and how it was for him to kind of deal with that and go through that, as well as having a family member in my own family that has Parkinson's. Michael J. Fox has kind of become the advocate for that. And so I just really wanted to hear his story, and it wasn't like very long at all. So I went in and I dove into this, and There were some really fun, interesting stories that I liked hearing about with his family, and specifically his grandmother. I loved that relationship and some of the stories that dealt with his grandmother. And just seeing, there are some things like in regards to the tabloids and the camera people and publicity trying to get into his wedding that I just could not like fathom the lengths that people were trying to go through to get to his wedding was just crazy. And then just some of the stuff that was happening to his wife even before they got married, and things that I never knew about. I mean, granted, I was a lot younger, but it was still things that I was just like, wow, that's kind of a lot. On the flip side, this is kind of a hard biography to read in the sense that it uses a lot of big words, and basically you find that Michael J. Fox is an extremely articulate person and he has a very good sense of vocabulary. But sometimes when you speak with such sophistication and such articulation, it kind of loses the audience because we're like, wait, what does that word mean? Now, I have a decent sense of vocabulary, but yes, if you string along a lot of big words, I might have to pause for a moment to be like, what's that again? Oh yeah, something like that. But it does make it a little bit hard to follow the flow of the story. And then speaking of the flow of the story, there are a lot of times where he's talking about one situation, and then that one situation will lead into kind of a segue of a whole different story. Like he goes off on tangents and you get all these other stories mixed into the main story that he's trying to tell, and it can be a little much sometimes, and it does disrupt the flow a little bit. But needless to say, it was very interesting seeing what he was going through and what treatments were available at the time, and how he was kind of feeling about that in his career and looking at things and how it affected his family. So I did read it. I gave it 3 stars. I think mostly just because of the issues I was running into with the flow and the wordage, but I do want to continue. I know we own another biography by Michael J. Fox. It's kind of the sequel, and then I know there's a new one that came out recently, and I do have a curiosity to read it more, because this is kind of like, not necessarily a prequel because it does cover his life up to a point, but this is up until I think like 2001, and obviously it's been a bit since then. So learning more of that story and then seeing if those other biographies have that kind of same flow, and going from there. So I will be taking a look at those biographies in the future, but I do recommend it if you are a fan of Back to the Future, if you are a fan of this man, if you are curious of what it is for somebody of celebrity status to have Parkinson's and what that means for them and what treatments he explored, if it's something like that, definitely pick this up. I mean, I've never met him, but he's absolutely seemingly to be an absolute lovely man. His wife in this just stood apart, and his stories about her were absolutely fantastic and wonderful and so loving. So I do recommend it. And so the last book that I read for the month of November was one of the books for our Romantasy Bingo Challenge, and that was our book talk sensation. But on hard mode, it had to be a book talk book that at the same time you were reading it, it was still considered, I think, an indie. And it was hard, but I did find one of the recommendations from Cassidy, and that was The King of Flesh and Bone by Liv Zander, which also was my only ebook for my bingo challenge so far. I've been trying to do them all physical. Didn't work out that way, but we did finish it, and it was still, as far as I know, indie at the time. This book, basically, you have a world that felt kind of medieval in a way, where you have kind of your peasant class, your small villages and things like that. But it's also dystopian in a way, because you find out that the god of rot, so to speak, has not been doing his job. And so the people that have passed on, animals that have passed on, are basically kind of like zombies, where they're not necessarily attacking people, but they try to rise from their graves. They keep trying to get to the king's castle to kind of be put at rest, and the king is not doing that. And then in this book you have Ada, who is widowed, and she's trying to do her part by helping her husband to not be one of the kind of zombified people that get out and go to the king's castle. She kind of tries to weigh down his grave so that he can't escape it, to kind of give him some sense of peace and comfort if she can. And she's always felt a little bit to blame as far as the relationship goes. She does part of this duty because she felt like she dishonored him in some way because she has been barren, and it eats away at her with a lot of the guilt that she has there. And in trying to weigh down her husband's grave on this specific night, the horse takes off because the horse is actually approaching death itself and feels the call to go to the king's castle. So Ada gets trapped in the ropes, the horse tangles up, speeds off, dragging Ada with her. Ada is basically at death's doorstep when she arrives at the king's doorstep, and the king ends up saving her life, and in doing so takes her kind of prisoner and starts to use her as his plaything. In his mind, he's calling her, you know, this is, you're mine, you belong to me, you're my woman. And Ada's like, yeah, no, I want out of here. I want to go home. I want to, I don't want to be here in this like land of the dead, so to speak. And she's mad at him because he's not doing his job. And all the while, they're having a lot of steamy moments. Enosh is the name of the king, and he, to be honest, I'm not a huge fan. One thing about this book was Ada I sympathized a little bit with, but not enough. Her personality, both characters just kind of lacked in the personality field for me. And while Ada would say that she hated Enosh and she tried to escape once, after that she just kept saying she hated him while also allowing him to do a lot of things. Or I should say somewhat allowing, because at some point she didn't really have a choice. So obviously there is some arguably consensual things going on in this. By the end of it, it didn't really feel like a lot of the plot had gone by. Like you're still kind of like, you think you know what the plot might be. Like, are they going to fall in love? Is this an enemies to lovers thing? Is she going to try to get him to fall in love, change his ways so that he, finally starts, doing what he's supposed to do and giving people their rest? There's something going on with his brothers that you're like, why are they always at odds? What's kind of, it's just, there was stuff that just wasn't making a lot of sense, and not a lot of clarification in that. And the plot wasn't necessarily crystal clear. There were some things that happened towards the end that definitely kind of gave you a bit of where it might go in the next book, where you're like, okay, maybe it's starting to change, but just not enough to really keep me invested in it. Like I said, I really couldn't care too much about Enosh, even though what he goes through towards the end is not the greatest, and kind of what he's gone through sucks. But personality wise, he just, and then obviously a lot of the non-consensual, like there might be one instance where it's consensual. Maybe. I think so. It's hard to say. But yeah, there's a lot of questionable consent in here, which I wasn't a fan of. I ended up giving it 3 stars. It kind of was what it was. For me, not really thinking I'm probably going to continue. I know it's a duology, but nothing really pulled me in. And like I said, if it's just going to be continuing with this, consent. I mean, it did leave off on a pretty interesting cliffhanger, but I don't think it's enough for me to really go through it. But who knows? Who knows? So I ended up giving that one 3 stars, and at least we ended up getting one of our Romantasy bingo books done. So we are on the board. We are on the board on our Romantasy bingo challenge. if you haven't heard me talk about the Romantasy Bingo Challenge, I'll go ahead and I will link a video down below to my TBR for that and kind of what that's about. But yeah, that is basically all I kind of read for the month. It was a very, very slow reading month, but it also leaves us with, I think, like 25 books left in our Goodreads reading goal to kind of get through in 1 month. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. But that is that. So other than that, I hope that your holidays went well. If you celebrated Thanksgiving, I hope that was really great. I hope that you were able to see your family and your loved ones and have a really great meal, and just take the time to remember, you know, what you are thankful for in your life and just kind of pay homage to that. With all that being said, I hope you guys are doing fantastic as we roll into the kind of climax of the holiday season, as it were. And I just want to wish you the best of a holiday season. Stay warm, stay safe, stay healthy, stay hydrated, and I will see you guys in the next video.